Well, good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to our session on the exploring the business value of building information modeling. I'd like to introduce myself a little bit here. My name is Steve Coburn, and I am the lead technical solutions engineer here at Sterling Systems. We want to thank you for attending today and want to share with you some information that we think will be beneficial for you and your company moving forward in the world of BIM. There are experiences that can test our leaders, like implementing change across a project team or an organization. Those of you that are already involved with BIM know this firsthand. While business and technology transformations are not necessarily new in the industry, this kind of transformation we are seeing from the building information modeling, or BIM as we call it today, presents a new set of challenges and opportunities for the building industry. This requires an approach that considers all of the integrated components of the business organization, not simply the investment in the technology. Our agenda today will start at acknowledging the current state of building business environment and discussing the BIM in the global markets. Next, we'll discuss where the value is in BIM and why we need to measure the value. Better yet, we're going to find out how to measure the value. After this, I'll talk about determining the level of BIM that you are currently in, and then we'll look at some ways on how to move to the next stage. And finally, I present a call to action by assessing your current path, defining your goals and vision, and finally suggest that you develop a business model to guide your team to success. So, let's set the context here. Let's look at some of the trends that are driving this change and the opportunities in the AEC industry. Over 50% of the world's population now live in cities, and this trend will only continue. A group called McKinsey estimates that in the year 2030, 5 billion people will live in urban areas. This is going to be an increase from 3.5 billion today, which China and India alone will see an additional 500 million citizens move to their cities. The availability of cheap natural resources, such as energy, water, materials, and land, is diminishing. Energy and water in particular are major components in the cost of operations for corporations and municipal governments. So, investors, consumers, and communities all have an interest in converting to more efficient ways of constructing and managing their buildings and the infrastructure over their life cycle. Today's marketplace is intensely competitive. The global recession has dramatically affected the level of new construction and changed expectations for the bottom line. Owners and AEC service providers need to achieve more with less and deliver projects faster and with less environmental impact in order to compete and win. AEC projects are getting more complex. With increasing requirements for sustainability or collaboration, projects are getting more and more complicated. You now need to coordinate and communicate design, materials, schedules, budgets, and compliance across a dispersed team of stakeholders. There's also an explosion of new technology, including cloud computing and mobile access. This is helping to change the way we work and giving us greater access to ever-growing amounts of data. Powerful computing capability is making analysis possible and earlier, setting expectations for realistic visualizations, and creating even more data to manage. BIM originated as a term to describe a technology, but the term has evolved as industry has begun to understand the integrated nature of BIM. Today, we describe BIM as a process, one that is model-centric and enabled by technology. BIM is not a product you can purchase or download, but is a methodology that is supported by a technology toolkit that helps business drive clarity. A component of the changes in technology we are witness to includes global trends in the adoption of building information modeling technologies. BIM is not just happening in isolated geos, and it's not about the software. What we are seeing today is a global trend towards a different process for managing the life cycle of all assets in the built environment. BIM adoption varies by country, but the consistent theme is growing awareness, exploration, use, and adoption of BIM processes on a global basis. If we look at BIM adoption in some of these areas, we can see that levels of BIM adoption in North America industry-wide have surged from 28% in 2007 to 71% in the year 2012. This was done by a research report done by McGraw-Hill back in 2012. Also, the UK saw a 39% adoption rate in 2013 versus 13% in 2010. And what's driving this BIM adoption? Globally, drivers ranging from government mandates to owner preference to industry trend are driving these levels of BIM adoption. The UK government's construction strategy states that BIM will become a key part of the government's procurement of public buildings. And by 2016, BIM will be mandatory in all public sector contracts. The Nordics have also a strong history in mandating BIM, especially the Norwegian BIM mandate from Statsbygg or Senate properties from Finland. In the U.S., all major projects conducted by the U.S. General Services Administration, this is the federal government's real estate management arm, require spatial program BIMs as a minimum requirement for approval. Other public sector U.S. government organizations that are developing programs and mandates regarding BIM include the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the U.S. Air Force, and the U.S. Coast Guard. So, let's talk about the return on investment in BIM. So, BIM seems to be a given in this world. And now we're going to transition to understanding where one can find the value in adopting the building information modeling process. As with most things in life and in business, it's not a clear-cut, one-size-fits-all measurement. Where you and your firm find the value in BIM is dependent on multiple variables. The value of BIM is realized in different ways by the variety of firms, types in the industry, and there are very different perspectives by player types among the BIM users. This session is intended to assist you in assessing what these variables are and where your firm sits in the process. But what is the business value that can be realized? It's important to realize that business value with BIM is driven by both internal and external forces and at multiple levels. Let's consider the areas where one might find value in BIM from multiple perspectives. At the very center, the value of BIM can be realized at the project level. This is where it's by its basic nature, BIM drives improved design quality, reduces project delivery cost and timelines associated with RFIs and change orders. This is where the use of BIM can have the impact to make a project to finish either under budget or over budget and ahead of schedule. The project level benefits of BIM are amplified as we look at the overall value to a firm that has implemented BIM. Firms can see the value of BIM in increased profits resulting from multiple factors. These include the ability to offer an expanded range of services which helps them to reach new market segments. The use of BIM also can help firms maintain repeat business with existing clients. The predictability that working in BIM affords a firm also can result in fewer legal claims and associated litigation fees. From an industry perspective, the value of BIM is measured in terms of the value of uniform standards that are enabled by the technology and drive greater understanding and efficiency in the industry. Democratized knowledge, aggregated data, and normalized processes impact the effectiveness of the entire ecosystem working together. So looking at the data from a study conducted in the U.S., which is considered a mature BIM adoption country, an aggregate of nearly 2/3 of all users surveyed report a positive perceived ROI. So what's the takeaway from these powerful numbers? Ultimately, the move to model-based processes is a proven paradigm shift. Further, this is not just about competitive advantage, but also return on investment. One way of looking at business value is through formal measurement of ROI. While 44% of BIM users in the US do not formally measure their BIM ROI, there is a clear correlation between the level of engagement with BIM and tendency to measure ROI. We've addressed value and recognize that it can be perceived at multiple levels. The difference between value and return on investment, or ROI, is that ROI is all about how one measures value. ROI represents a calculation of the ratio between cost and benefits. To determine their return on investment, firms need to assess costs that come in multiple categories. This can take the shape of actual startup investment in things like hardware, software, new talent, physical workspace. Costs also include expenditures related to implementation, such as your training, the impact of disruptions to an established workflow, and the time required to implement these changes themselves, and of course the communications required to make it all work. Finally, BIM adoption represents a significant process change that has a significant impact on cost as it affects team roles, communication models, requires customization and innovation of process, and also triggers new patterns of approvals and decision making. The benefits side of the equation includes elements of value, and these are weighed against the cost. There are three ways in which ROI is commonly calculated. First is the payback method. This method compares the initial cash outlay for the investment against the future cash flows of the initiative and determines the length of time for the original investment to be recouped. The net present value method discounts future cash flows so the calculation reflects the time value of money. And finally, the internal rate of return method calculates the rate of return on the investment based on cash flows. Whichever you use, the assumptions about investment costs and returns are complex. In making a process change, the entire project team, this includes architects, engineers, and contractors, must meet to identify the targets for saving. This exploded pie chart identifies some of those examples of areas that can be targeted for savings. In ROI workshops conducted by Autodesk, this sort of model can be used to help identify and examine the benefits that could accrue to the multiple parties involved in the project. A project team can use tools like a spreadsheet to target benefits that they would like to realize collaboratively. In this example, a team examined these options and used a spreadsheet to understand which parties would benefit from each line item. For example, with this worksheet of savings divided by parties participating in the project, they were able to determine who would benefit from specific savings. If we look at some of the benefits from the previous example, it is clear that there are different priorities in determining ROI for each part of the project ecosystem, as different benefits accrue to involved parties with varying priority. Owners, for example, benefit from the improved multi-party communication that can result from BIM adoption. They also realize great value in the outcomes of an improved project process. The designers, both architects and engineers, see a return on increased productivity, which can help them make the most of their time. Improved communication processes are also an easily realized value. The construction contractors also benefit from improved productivity of personnel on a project, which is just one factor contributing to lower project costs for them. I'd also like to bring up some topics to your attention that will give you some help in using ROI to help your business leverage the value of BIM. What is the connection between your company strategy and measuring the value of process change such as BIM? I'll leave these up here for a few seconds so everybody can see them. Next, how will you communicate your leadership vision and plan for change? Third, how could BIM process change impact your business model? Number 4, what are the obstacles to achieving new benefits and how could you overcome them? And finally, which metrics support a business case, return on investment, or ROI? Now, let's talk about some ways to determine your level of BIM. Shifting our focus to how you can maximize the value of BIM regardless of your current state, let's look at some universal requirements for BIM implementation. This integrated business and technology strategy consists of 4 primary areas of development. This is business strategy, leadership and planning, process change, and measurement or assessment. The business transformation begins with a strategy that defines the organizational goals and expectation of the business. During this stage, business executives define reasonable milestones and outline the metrics by which success will be measured. The vision is enabled by the leaders, sponsored at the executive level, who begin to motivate and drive change within the business. Process change is the next step. It is important to consider that significant value can be derived from piloting a BIM process on a small number of projects, with a focus on closely tracking and measuring the most important success metrics. Firms evolve in their use of BIM as they move to higher levels of engagement. Understanding where your firm is and where you want to be are necessary steps on the roadmap to the next level. We'll examine how you can use ROI to track your investments and your progress in realizing benefits in a process that you repeat every time you move from one level of BIM adoption to the next. First, when we speak of phases of BIM, there are several ways to define BIM maturity that include understanding frequency of use, percent of projects in a firm, and more. Firms evolve in their use of BIM as they move to higher levels of engagement. We start at level 0, which is pre-BIM. At phase 1, a firm will have moved from 2D design to 3D modeling to at least pilot BIM processes. In phase 2, a primary goal for business leaders is to translate isolated successes on projects and derive standardized processes that can be applied across business lines and additional projects. Phase 3 BIM is the final stage of BIM maturity. Organizations that have achieved this level of sophistication will be able to complete a variety of model-based planning, design, construction, and even operations and maintenance processes to streamline their business operations. But moving to the next phase of BIM adoption is a cycle that gets replayed every time you move from one phase of BIM adoption to the next. Starting with the move to phase 1 BIM, which is moving to the use of 3D modeling versus 2D design, investments are required. In this case, they include establishing mandate and vision along with a framework for governance, including the definition of modeling standards and deliverables for the business. An investment in training or in employees who possess desired skills is also required. Organizations may also wish to pilot BIM processes on projects that are representative of their core expertise to help them to be able to make comparisons with their 2D methodology. Firms will experience a process change and then reach the benefits phase during which they can measure the return on their investment. To move to phase 2, the extended use of BIM starts the same cycle all over again. Investments in further planning and training are required along with broader adoption of BIM technologies. At this point, implementation includes projects that require expanded design team adoption of BIM. The benefits realized from Phase 2 BIM implementation may include project-level benefits, plus additional measures such as volume of repeat business and level of new work. To move to the next level, Phase 3, or integrated BIM, involves further investment in process and systems that enable participation in complex integrated projects, and with the process change, established project and enterprise level standards will be in place on all projects and success metrics will be captured and analyzed across the organization. No longer constricted to one phase of the project lifecycle, firms at this level will have the capability to perform advanced analyses that consider lifecycle cost, sustainability and environmental concerns, and supply chain management. Companies that achieve integrated BIM can have substantial global competitive advantage, as they will inevitably reduce waste, lower cost, and increase client satisfaction. So we now come to the last stage for you to progress in the adoption of BIM. First, you need to assess your firm's BIM adoption stage. So is it phase 1, phase 2, or phase 3? And you need to define vision and goals for your firm. Autodesk has produced a document to help you do exactly this, titled Autodesk BIM Deployment Plan, a practical framework for implementing BIM. Viewers of this presentation will receive this deliverable in an email, and we'll send it out. It's going to be titled BIM Implementation Process Document, so be looking out for it so that your spam filters don't catch it. Finally, build a business model to get there. We've gone over several items that have described the current state, the phases, and the processes needed to start planning. So, utilize this information to formulate that model and get people excited about adopting. We would like to thank you for joining us today, and we'll be sending out links for this recorded webinar to our attendees afterwards. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us by phone or email. We'll be happy to help you, and in your process of getting BIM started for your firm, we'll help you do the best we can. So with this, we'll call it a day and have a good morning.